One more time, I will shake not only the earth, but heaven too. And this phrase, one more time, makes clear that the things shaken are removed, since they are created things, so the things not shaken may remain. Therefore, since we have received an unshakable kingdom, let us have grace through which we may offer service that will please Elohim with reverence and fear. The quotes of Haggai, he states to us, that's actually reading out of Hebrews chapter 12, quoting of Haggai, that there's a time that is coming upon the earth, as he would have been, the writer of Hebrews would have been looking forward, that everything that can be shaken will be shaken. These are verses that I usually go to at the time of Sukkot, as I order a lulav, the etrog, and stand there shaking this offering. And from a rabbinical standpoint, it is done to the north, south, the east, the west, up and down. And I consider these verses at that time. We know that through history there have been numerous shakings that have happened. It appears at the moment that we're entering into another time of shaking. Over the last few weeks, we have, for those that follow the news in Israel, I know that for many people, not those of you that are listening here, but for many people, the news of what happens in Israel is pretty much irrelevant. As I talk to people and make a little statement here and there of, what happened in Israel, and they look at you with that, cow look at a new gate look, you move on from there. But just in recent days, a shooting at Tepuach Junction, one of the men that was from the city of Itamar passed away. There was a video just a couple of days ago, as I'm recording this is Tuesday morning, May 11th. There's a video that was put out on the internet of an Israeli driving along right at the Dung Gate. As those of you that have been to Israel, you know where the Dung Gate is, where we go in, the main gate, we go in to go to the Western Wall and then up onto the Temple Mount. He was almost taken out of his car and would have been lynched. In the Palestinian area there, he would have been drug off past the city of David and probably never to be seen again. This ended up on Jerusalem Day, a day that commemorates, and I mean, one of the most amazing days. If you've ever been to Israel during Jerusalem Day, it is a fabulous sight. But in the process of that, some of the Arabs were lighting fireworks up on the Temple Mount. One of them was a tree caught on fire, and the media spin of all of this that happened. Continuing on from there. Yesterday, Kathy called me, texted me and said, "Are you watching the news?" I was not in a place that I was really following the news, and rockets being fired out of Gaza once again. How does that giving away land, Ariel Sharon, how does that giving away of land work out for generations once, he is gone? But what he negotiated in that day of giving away the land of Gaza, the land of Gush Katif, giving that to land for peace. Yeah, that's worked out. It worked out so well for the Native Americans in the United States, didn't it? And is probably working out even worse for those in Israel. Hundreds of rockets coming out of Gaza. 7 of them aimed at Jerusalem, and the political leaders of Israel have stated that the Palestinians have crossed a new line now. It's a red line that has been crossed, and we must do something about it. This is very similar to living in a subdivision in which every single one of your neighbors their homes have been broken into, your children have been abused, your possessions robbed, and the house burned down. It's happened to every single one of your neighbors, but you just kind of sat back and said, I mean, it's them, it's my neighbor. But then when they come and begin to break into your house, well, they've crossed a red line. So the people who have died through the years in Ashkelon, in Ashdod, in various communities around the line, that border with Gaza, that wasn't a red line for anyone. It wasn't until they fired a rocket in Jerusalem. May these people, both those who are doing this and those who have allowed it, be judged, and be judged harshly. Other things that are happening in the world, of course, and I'm going to get to the Torah portion in just a couple of moments, but in North Carolina, they have declared a state of emergency because of this hacking in the gas line going from the Gulf of Mexico up into, I guess, Virginia or somewhere. About 45% of the gas, the flow of gas has been cut off. I went yesterday and went to the gas station. There was a line of about 5 or 6 cars in front of me, and ended up having to go in, could not use a credit card, could not use a debit card, had to go in and give them my $20 because that was the limit of gas that I could get. And I had to go to the airport last night in Nashville and pick up someone for a wedding for some friends of ours this week. And so it really was a reminder of, for any of you who lived through the 1970s and the gas lines, the gas rationing, isn't it interesting? Just one of those things to put in your things that make you go, that last week, Mr. Biden and his wife took a photo op with none other than Jimmy and Rosalind Carter, the most anti-Semitic Sunday school teacher that's ever lived, and also the man that gave us amazing rates of inflation, and the man that gave us gas lines. I will shake everything that can be shaken. I have a word for you today. A word I shared with some people last night. Now, I don't do many, as you know, I don't do a lot of movie themes. I'm not one given to taking the latest secular entertainment and trying to put a spin on it and make it sound holy. But I do, I just going to give you this. In light of Hebrews and the words of Haggai about I will shake everything that can be shaken, this is a day not to be shaken, but to be stirred. Yeah, that one. Okay, not to be shaken, but to be stirred. Stirred to do something, to act, to be able to look at your neighbors, your family, and give an answer. Give an account for what you believe. Give an account for who you believe in. It is not a day for compromise. It is a day to stand up, to be stirred, and, I dare say, to be counted. Which takes us to the book of Bamidbar, or I believe, wrongly called the book of Numbers. Before I say that, I one more thing on my mind here before I forget. I was talking to someone yesterday who is a ministry leader, and we were discussing how little feedback we get in these days. Now, I don't know of any of us that actually do this. If you're doing it for the right reason, the teachings you do, the recordings, all of these things. If you're doing it for feedback, then it's about yourself, and that's not the right reason to begin with. But sometimes it's kind of nice to know that somebody's out there and is actually listening. And so I had someone this past week that I really thought that they had figured out a way to tap into my prayer that morning, or that without asking my permission, the Father had put them on a three-way call with my prayer to Him. But however it happened, I received a text that a few days ago, and it was a verse that was an answer, literally an answer, confirmation to something that I was praying that very morning. So, Dorothy, thank you. Appreciate you, and that incredible other guy that lives there with you too. So, thank you so much. Bamidbar, in the wilderness, called Numbers. Okay, why is it called Numbers? It's because in verse 2 it says take a census, or the wording is once again words that we have talked about a number of times of Naso, of lift up the heads. So it is about making sure that everyone is counted in that day, and we'll go through various things. We'll get back to that in just a few moments. But the Torah, the books of the Torah, as in we go back to Bereshit, Genesis, in the beginning, okay? These books are named in such a way to bring out a theme. And so somewhere along the way, the theme was kind of rearranged, was changed. And in order to understand this concept, we need to consider, first of all, the title of Numbers, Bamidbar, in the wilderness. This word it begins with a bait, which is, it would give us the wilderness, okay? You take off the bait and you have wilderness, Bamidbar, or Midbar. And so this would be a mem, Midbar, mem, which is water, dalit, which is a door, bait, which is a house, and resh, which is the head. So the head of the house. So going back to the wilderness, it would begin with bait. It would be bait, mem, dalit, bait, resh. What does this word tell us? What does this word speak to us about regarding this book? It actually sets an amazing stage for the book and how we're going to look at it, as opposed to the title, the more westernized title of Numbers. Okay, now let me explain myself here. The word Bamidbar, it's about a house, okay, and then then waters. Mem is water. So you have a house. Picture this: a house or somewhere that you are at, and then you have waters which are connecting you from this place in time, this house, and then leading you to a door, the dalet, a door, of another house, the bait, in which you are going to meet the resh, the head of the house. So it's about traveling from one point to another point and meeting your destiny, and meeting the one of your destiny. I thought about an illustration for this, and I guess the best one that I could come up with is a couple of years ago, BC, before COVID, had an incredible opportunity to earn a free, all expense paid trip to Hawaii. It's kind of like the only way that I was going to be able to go. But Kathy and I went to Hawaii. We stayed at an amazing resort. And in the midst of this resort was these different pools. And, it was kind of the lazy stream deal that you could, float along, get a float or float in your back or whatever you wanted to do. And you just kind of moved along from one place to another place, from the beginning to the end. But to actually experience the beginning of this thing that they had laid out in the midst of the resort, there was a water tube. Now, I'm not really one for closed-in spaces. Okay, I don't like cities. I don't like closed-in spaces. Just not my thing. Well, there was a water tube there, and when in Hawaii, do as the other tourists are doing. So we climbed up on the top, and this was my beginning spot. Well, in order to get to my destination, I had to jump in that water tube and be taken through on the, kind of riding in the water through that water tube into the next pool and on down. Not one for small spaces, and never being in a water tube, I know that I've led a very sheltered life, but it never bothered me before that I'd never been in one. I got in that water tube and not really knowing what to expect, that you're going to have water in your face and in your mouth and in your nose, and you're going to have moments of time in which you think you're going to drown, and you're going to come out on the other end and just, basically be floating and dead. You don't know which way you're going. It's a little on the dark side in there. Not really afraid of the dark, but I don't like small spaces. And so this was the beginning of my going from one destination, or from one place to another place, and getting to the final destination down here. And that's what we did. Bamidbar, for the Hebrews, it's about leaving a place where the head is not there. See, the resh is at the end of the journey, not at the beginning of the journey. The beginning, bait, is about exile. It's about being in Mitzrayim, in Egypt, and jumping in the water. And through that journey that you're going to take, you're going to eventually come to a place of a door, which, by the way, we could actually picture this out of the door into the house, which is the promised land, Israel, Canaan at the time, where they're going to meet with the head, is going to be that place on the side of the eastern bank of the Yarden, the Jordan River. So Bamidbar, the word, is actually a pictogram of the journey that they are going to take. It goes even farther in this as we go over to 1 Corinthians chapter 10, and words that have always, I've taught on these words many times, but words that have always been very intriguing to me. I want to go specifically to chapter 10, verse 4 of 1 Corinthians, and we'll back up and kind of expound on this a little bit more. But it says, and they all drank the same drink from the Spirit, and they drank from a Spirit-sent rock, which followed them. And the rock was Messiah. Now, I remember reading in the Chumash or somewhere years ago, the rabbinical authors who said that the rock was following them through the wilderness. And I thought that's kind of ridiculous. I got these images in my mind of the Roadrunner and Wile E. Coyote, as he has ordered from the Acme Rock Company a rock that he can hide under in order to sneak up on the Roadrunner. Never worked out to begin, it never worked out, but this is what he did. And so it was kind of like, he's hiding underneath this rock, and he's trying to sneak up on the Roadrunner, and when the Roadrunner turns around, he kind of covers himself. That's just yeah, I know that you don't want to know kind of what goes on sometimes in my imagination, but that's for me to live with, and sometimes Kathy. Sometimes even our children and grandchildren have to live with that, but that's another story. Moving on from there. And I thought, this is just ridiculous. And then I had read the words, but I had never read the words. And it says, Paul says that the rock followed them. What actually followed them? Here's the interesting aspect of this, and goes along with the word Bamidbar. And our pictogram here is that there is a rabbinical teaching that I tend to think is really, really amazing, that it was not actually that Mount Sinai, that the rock that Moshe had hit was following them. It wasn't like a piece of Mount Sinai, kind of broke off and was, doing the Wile E. Coyote thing. But it was that the waters that came forth from Mount Sinai continued to go with them. Maybe I'm a little crazy here, but where do you get that much water for that many people through the 40 years in the wilderness? Could there have been a miraculous event very similar to the manna that's coming down from and is on the ground 6 days out of the week? That their water supply is also a miraculous event, that water that began to come forth from Mount Sinai is a river that kind of goes with them. That the outflow of the river was following them along. Get that picture, all right? And then we see this later on as we get to when Miriam dies, and Miriam is the one that's prophesying about the water, about the living water. She's prophesying that the water flowing from Mount Sinai is a picture of the Messiah going with them. So when Miriam dies, the prophecy ends and the water quits flowing, but now they're at the door. Yeah, now they're at the door, which will lead into the promised land, in which they will come face to face with the one who was prophesied by the water. Okay, that's all in the first word. That's all in the title of this word of Bamidbar. Or we can look at it as numbers of names and faces. So we have a choice. We have a choice here as we begin this book in the Torah. And I said to a group at our house the other day, what was it that stood out to you in the book of Vayikra, Leviticus? What was it that stood out? And we kind of went around the table and asked the question, what stood out to you? I want to ask you to do the same thing here. I want to expound on this to all of you. There is something, I believe this with everything that I have. There is something in the book of Bamidbar that the Almighty desires to reveal to you personally this Torah cycle. I don't know what it is. Don't know where that verse or that word may be. But there's something that He desires to reveal to you. So I issue you a challenge this year. That as we go through the book of Bamidbar, be prayerfully, as Moshe was doing in the book of Vayikra, be prayerfully, searchingly searching for that which he wants to speak to you in this book. Because we can look at it two ways. We can look at it as the events that are taking them from their origin to their destination, or we can just focus on the people. We can focus on, such things like, Korah, and point some fingers at him of how, and we'll talk about him, of course, but we can point the finger and, wow, bad Korah, bad Korah. Or what about the 10 spies? They just, lack of faith. And, if I'd have been there, if I'd have been one of them, I'd have been standing with Joshua and Caleb, and it'd have been 9-3 instead of 2-10. Of course, I'd be on the right side. Yeah. That's really, yeah. We can look at, Balaam and Balak and the donkey, and we can get our eyes on the events, the people of the events, and try to make ourselves look, very spiritual in our day, because we would never do something like that of, trying to, a little witchcraft of prayers towards something. No, never do that. So I'll just move on, because no, none of us would ever be guilty of something like that. Or we can look at the events and see them in light of the reason they're given to us. And that takes us back over to 1 Corinthians chapter 10, and words that you might want to tag, in the opening page of a Midbar. Put yourself a little note that says, before reading this book, I need to go back and to 1 Corinthians and see the purpose of me reading the book. Let me give you the purpose. For brothers, I don't want you to miss the significance of what happened to our fathers. All of them were guided by a pillar of cloud, and they all passed through the sea. And in connection with the cloud and with the sea, they all immersed themselves into Moshe. Also, they all ate the same food from the Spirit. They all drank the same drink from the Spirit. For they drank from the Spirit-sent rock, which followed them. Okay? Get the picture. And the rock was the Messiah. Yet, with the majority of them, Elohim was not pleased. So their bodies were strewn across the desert. Yeah, there's this thing in the wilderness of basically it's a bunch of dry bones, of a bunch of people that didn't make it. Consider that out of the hundreds of thousands of people that came out of Mitzrayim, 2, get that, 2 made it into the promised land. And then we read the next verses, which should send chills up and down your spine. Now these things took place as prefigurative historical events, warning us not to set our hearts on evil as they did. Don't be idolaters, as some of them were. As Tanakh puts it, the people sat down to eat and drink, then they got up to indulge themselves. And let us not engage in sexual immorality, as some of them did, with the consequences that 23,000 died in a single day. And let us not put the Messiah to test, as some of them did, and were destroyed by snakes. Yeah, not into that one. And don't grumble, as some of them did, and were destroyed by the destroying angel. Okay, most of us, we were doing okay there to the end, weren't we? I got the, okay, we got the immorality thing. Okay, got that one pushed to the side, not going there. And, the indulging in revelry, drunken parties, the like, and not going there. so I'm okay. Yeah, I got this thing down. And then he's got to add that last few words that just get you, doesn't it? It's like, Shaul, couldn't you have just said, you know, I'm not sure I actually heard those words from the Ruach. So since I'm not real sure that I actually heard them, I'm just going to leave them out. No. He's got to put the words in of, and don't grumble, as some of them did. See, the greatest sin, to me, the greatest sin of the wilderness was not the Korah and all of these other things that we read about, but it was a constant state of grumbling, a constant state of complaining. So the people that are numbered are walking through from their old house to get to their new house, where they're going to meet the head of the house. They're being carried by the living water of Messiah. And for the vast majority, the only thing they can figure out to do on a daily basis is grumble and complain. And because of that, see, there were people's bones that were strewn all over the desert for many reasons. Going back to Korah again, to pick on him a little extra, his bones are actually buried somewhere under the desert. And a lot of other people with him were also. But the vast majority of the bones, if we were to go through the wilderness and be able to tag each one of the bones, each one of the sets of bones, tag them and say, this is the reason that they are lying here in the wilderness, instead of entering in through the door to meet the head of the house, it would be a kind of, it'd be like grumble, 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 complain, complain, complain. Eventually you just put ditto the last one on there or something like that. Grumbling and complaining is it's not just that it's a lack of faith and trust, but it's looking at the Almighty and saying, what you're taking me through, I don't appreciate. I don't appreciate the work that you're trying to do in my life. That's kind of the root of this thing. The wilderness is an amazing place, actually, and it's interesting that it is associated with living water, that it's taking them from one place to another, because the wilderness has something about it that's unique to the wilderness, is that there is a lack of water because there's a lack of rain, and since there's a lack of rain, which produces a lack of water, then there's a lack of vegetation, which means there's a lack of number of other things, which means it's difficult to survive. Okay, he did not take them through a garden in order to get to the promised land, did he? Why? Because in a garden, you can figure out how to survive on your own. Okay, there's fruit there, there's animals there, there's shade, there's pretty much in a garden, a fruitful garden, there's everything you really need to survive on your own. But in the wilderness, a little different, because you don't have a lot of fruit. You don't have a lot of vegetation growing. You have a difficult time with water sources if left to your own. There's no shade, there's no shelter. A blazing hot sun. You can die of exposure. It's a place that, unlike a garden you can survive on your own. You may suffer a little bit of depression from loneliness, but you can, as Dr. Doolittle did, talk to the animals. But in the wilderness, it's a place that being alone is going to make things exponentially more difficult. The wilderness is a place that you learn that you need each other, because the work that it's going to take you to survive, to go through the wilderness, you're going to have to learn to depend on one another. So the wilderness is a place of survival. It's not a place that's meant for thriving. Now, we could probably say that because of the supernatural events of the Almighty in the wilderness to the Hebrews, that they were thriving in a place that most would just be surviving. They had whatever amount of water they needed. They had they had the manna. They had the food supply that they needed. They had shelter. Okay, there's a cloud that's covering the Hebrews as they're going from place to place through their water tube and beyond. So they are given all of these supernatural things in order that in a place of survival, they are thriving, which is, by the way, a witness to those who are around them. Should we not expect that as we begin a journey going from the house of exile into the house of the head, that we would experience the same thing? And so, maybe what we're going through continually at this point in exile is setting us up. The attitude that we have in exile will be the attitude we take into the journey through our wilderness. So if you're complaining today, you're probably going to complain tomorrow. If you complain tomorrow, you're going to complain the next day. The only way to quit complaining is to quit doing it today, to start catching yourself. You ever had, maybe you did this as, you were trying to take something out of your life, maybe a word, and I'm not talking about, cursing and stuff like that, but just a word, okay? Maybe I want to take the word, as I said a few weeks ago, I want to take the word luck. Luck has no place in my life, none at all. I do not use the word, refuse to use the word, not me, okay? But maybe you've been a person that's, you've said the word luck a lot through the years. And so it's just something that kind of rolls out of your mouth. And so you tell your spouse and your children, say, this is a word that I'm no longer going to associate with in my life. So anytime that you hear me say the word luck in association with my life, I want you to call me on it, and I'm going to give you $1. Well, that's a great way to get that word out of your vocabulary, because especially for your children, they're going to be like all over you in this thing, and you're going to find out, when you start shelling out those dollar bills, it's going to be kind of a challenge, and it's not going to take you quite as long. So maybe you need to, have the people around you that, I don't know how you want to challenge them, give them $1, I don't know, but, have people challenge you in life. Give them the permission. And you knew there was something else coming, didn't you? You kind of, okay. Give them the permission And then don't get mad at them and yell at them when they challenge you on your complaining. Yeah, because back to survival teaching, you will perform like you train. You will perform like you train. I guarantee you that in this day, police officers are going through a greater amount of training they've upped the training probably. If they have a good leadership in their force, they've upped their training because of things that are happening. And so many things that are happening are maybe, this sounds judgmental, and I know many officers, I don't want this to sound like that, but I'm just kind of throwing it out, but some things happen because you got lax in your training. And then something happens and you say, wait a minute, I need to step that back up. So if, maybe the complaining issue would be something we need to step up. It's a place that Bamidbar, the wilderness, is a place that you learn to appreciate even the very small things. We lived in the desert twice, actually. We lived in Arizona 2 different times. Kathy grew up there in Tucson. We lived in Tucson, and we also lived up in the White Mountains. I grew up in Florida, okay? I mean, I didn't know that you were supposed to be able to see that far to the horizon without being out at the beach. But there's not a lot, between, it's just kind of like open space. There's nothing there. So you can see a long ways. And because there's not a lot of rain, there's not a lot of water, which means there's not a lot of vegetation, which means you have pretty much different shades of brown. The desert is known for, wow, that's beautiful light brown, as opposed to over there is dark brown. It's just brown. Going out in the desert in Tucson and going during the time that the prickly pear cactus or the saguaro cactus would bloom. The bloom of a cactus in the desert will stun you. The vibrance, you can see it from a far distance. The vibrance of that flower, the yellow, the fuchsia. I would literally stop just to take in that moment of beauty. The wilderness is a place that you learn to appreciate that which you've been given, or you die, one of the two. But it's a place that you're supposed to learn to appreciate even the small things that come your way. It's a place of seeking. The wilderness, the desert, doesn't just give to you in abundance. You're going to have to seek things out in the wilderness. It's a place that when we go through those, as we all have in life, in walking this out with the Creator, He takes us through. I think Pilgrim's Progress. I don't know if I ever read that book. One of these days, I guess I need to read it. But I know the concepts of it. Anyone who is done great things, okay, the heroes of our faith, they have something in common. They all walk through times of wilderness. Look at Yosef in the prison. I mean, talk about a wilderness. Moshe, Daniel in Babylon. I mean, every single person of faith that we would read about in the book of Hebrews, they all have the same story, that they walk through a place of wilderness. But the place of the wilderness is not a place of punishment, it's a place of a gift. And the gift is that in the wilderness you learn to seek out and then to appreciate. And once again, the wilderness is a place in which you learn to rely on one another, not just talk about relying on one another, but actually do it. See, there's a lot of talk in our day of community. We need to learn how to trust each other, rely on it. Let me tell you what it boils down to for the most part: talk. I hear a lot of talk, and I see very little action of people actually beginning to reach out and to become a part of others' lives in order to help them and make a difference in moving forward to find that door that the living water is leading us to. Now, lastly, as we finish here, we see in this Torah portion the placement of the tribes. Each one of them has a banner, and so we see the first set is to the east, then to the south, then to the west, and then to the north. Their banners are a lion, a man, an ox, and an eagle. I think there's some other places that bring this out. So it literally looks kind of like the throne of the Almighty is going through the wilderness. But then it names all of the people that are here. It says to give those that are of military age or to be recorded by name. Everyone in the wilderness is to look at themselves as significant in the task of taking the community from one place to another. Everyone is significant in this. Everyone has their job. We see that specific tribes and families were given specific tasks. It's easy when you open the book and it says that your family is assigned the task of X. This is what you're to do. When we go from place to place, this is your job. That's the easy one. It's when you don't see your name in the book attached to the task and you have to seek out what that task actually is for you individually. I would imagine people, to quote Will Rogers, people change but not much. That the vast majority of the people were basically just along for the ride. They never found their purpose in the wilderness. And because of that, that may be part of the reason that their bones were found lying in the wilderness. When you don't find your purpose in going from the house of exile to his house, if you don't find your purpose in this, and you do have one, you will find yourself as just another set of bones laying next to somebody else's set of bones who also didn't find their purpose. All right, it's going to be an exciting walk through Bamidbar. He has something for you this year. Let's find it, okay? Shabbat Shalom, Shavua Tov. Have a blessed, prosperous week. Bezrat Hashem, God willing. We'll see you again next week, as long as, we don't have some other kind of disaster. Pray for the peace of Yerushalayim. There's my calendar saying that I need to quit, so I guess I will. Until next week, be strong.
Yivarechecha Adonai v'yishmarecha Ya'er Adonai panav elecha v'yichunecha. Yisa Adonai panav elecha v'yasem lecha shalom.